I love rare things, more specifically rare items in video games. It started with Borderlands. In early 2020, the thing was just starting and I was pretty directionless between jobs, bored, and uninterested in much, and finding rare guns and shields in Borderlands ended up really grabbing my attention in free time. In my time playing Borderlands, I was always going for what I perceived to be the rarest items. As an example, I spent 175 hours hunting a single shield in Borderlands 2, which, funnily enough, was actually the worst version of that shield, but I wanted it just because it was rare. Eventually, I moved on to Pokémon shiny hunting. Given my tendency to go for the rarest things in Borderlands, it made sense that I gravitated towards the more rare side of things in Pokémon, which ended up being full odds shiny hunting. However, after spending well over 4,000 hours shiny hunting and being around many parts of the community, I've had some major disagreements with the full odds community at large surrounding the term full odds, its implications, and how the full odds community perceives and treats the rest of the Pokemon community. To really understand the issue, we first need to break down rarity. There's many different ways that we use and interpret the concept of rarity. Oxford Languages says it's of an event, situation, or condition not occurring very often, of a thing not found in large numbers and consequently of interest or value, and unusually good or remarkable. I think the first and second are the most relevant, but they're just scratching the surface. I've broken down rarity into 5 main categories. There's rarity by scarcity, uniqueness, difficulty, covetousness, and resource investment. They all have some overlap, but each is a little different. A good example would be a sealed first edition base set booster box of the Pokemon trading card game. Rarity by scarcity means there's not enough of something to go around. There's only so many of these boxes left. Plus, the people with them don't even want to sell them, so there's very few in circulation. It's rare because it's coveted too. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who'd like to get their hands on one of these boxes purely for the sake of having it. This also ties back into rarity by scarcity, as something can't be perceived as scarce if nobody wants it, and as less people want something relative to the supply, the less rare it seems. There's also rarity by resource investment. Some things are rare because you need to invest some kind of resource you have into it, and everyone has a limited supply of resources to some degree. But if you had $1 billion, getting one of these boxes would be trivial. Some of the box owners might want millions of dollars to hand them over, but you could snatch up the entire supply without much issue if you had enough money. Then there's rarity by uniqueness. There may be a lot of something to go around, but perhaps one of those things has a unique quality to it that creates the perception of rarity. A good example of this would be the Cheeto shaped like a Charizard. There is and will always only be this one unique Cheeto Charizard. Someone might find a similar one, but the chances of an exact replica being produced in the Cheetos factory is unlikely. It'll also always be the first Charizard Cheeto anyone ever found, and that gives it its own rarity. This example also has rarity by scarcity, covetousness, and resource investment as well. Lastly, we have rarity by difficulty. This means there's something that can be obtained by anyone, but only a limited pool of people can acquire it through skill, which allows that group of people to limit the supply artificially. An example of this would be World of Warcraft. Let's say there's a raid that's incredibly difficult. It maybe takes 30 minutes, so not much of a commitment, but there's only 1 or 2 groups of people that can do the raid, and at the end of the raid there's a unique item that you get for completing it. This means that item could hypothetically be acquired infinite times, but because only these few select people can get it in practicality, the supply is limited, and therefore the item is perceived as more rare. Let's go back to rarity by resource investment though. Resource investment is giving up or spending anything that you have a limited supply of. In the case of the Pokemon box, it's money. However, if you had enough time, you could maybe make enough money. Time is a limited resource for all of us. Other resources end up typically translating to money or time as well. The important one I want to focus on here is time, as it's really the main thing that makes full odd shinies rare, and it's the only resource that there's no way to get more of than you naturally have. As an example, you can hunt a static encounter Pokemon like Kyogre. This hunt is about 55 hours average. This is considered decently rare for a full odd shiny, but nothing crazy. Or you could hunt the roaming Raikou or Entei in Heart Gold Soul Silver. If you're super efficient, you can hit odds by about 180 hours. These are generally considered more rare shinies as a consequence. Now, going back to defining, full odds as a term was likely coined by players around Generation 2, or at least the concept was being formed at that time. Shiny Pokemon in this generation are a 1 in 8192 chance. Every time you encounter a wild Pokemon, you have that same chance of it being a shiny. If you're not familiar, shiny Pokemon just have an alternate color palette and a special animation when they're thrown out into battle. That's it. In Generation 2, that shiny chance was based on their stats, but they don't even have the best or even necessarily good stats, and in later games, their stats are entirely unrelated to their shininess. They're just rare for the sake of being rare and giving the player a cool little visual bonus. However, with their stats being tied to their shininess in this generation, you can actually breed 2 Pokemon with a particular set of stats and increase the likelihood of one of the offspring being shiny. I won't get into the details of the process, but basically you can get the chances of getting a shiny down to 1 in 64 in some instances. This would be the first example of what we call method hunting, which for now you can think of as just circumventing those base 1 in 8192 chances, therefore circumventing the time commitment required for some shinies in these games. When hunting a full-out shiny, you simply need to encounter wild or static Pokemon over and and over until the one you're looking for is shiny. There are a lot of variables that affect how fast you can do each encounter. For example, static encounters can generally take between 12 and 30 seconds, with some potentially taking a lot longer, but basically you just reset your game over and over. Random encounters are usually between 12 and 16 seconds each. You're spending time getting the encounter, going into the battle animation, and then running away from the Pokemon. When you do the math, doing enough encounters to make it statistically likely that you find the shiny you're looking for means an investment of 30 or more hours for most full odds hunts, at least in older games. Keep in mind though, this is the average time investment, not what you'll actually spend. Because it's luck based, you could get a shiny on your first encounter, or you could go 100,000 without seeing one. Typically when I refer to the time commitment for a shiny, I mean the average time commitment statistically. If you want this full out shiny in this game under these circumstances, you'll end up committing this many hours on average. So the only thing between you and this rare thing is investing the resource of your time. This time investment is what makes most shinies rare. There is the exception of some shinies being rare by scarcity. There are some games that are difficult to obtain or expensive, which is more resource investment. But then there's event Pokemon, and there's some other niche scenarios where shinies are rare for other reasons. But for the purposes of this video, when I say a shiny is rare, I'm referring to it being rare due to resource investment, and that resource being the player's time. Some might try to muddy the waters by saying that shinies are other forms of rarity, and they might be right to a certain degree, but it's almost never relevant to the conversation. As an example, someone might say people care about getting shiny Rayquaza more than they do about a Pidgey, even if they take the same amount of time. It's true that some shinies are more coveted than others, but the problem with this argument is that if someone wanted Rayquaza or the Pidgey and they have the relevant games, the only real barrier for them is time, at least assuming they want to do full odds. Wanting the Rayquaza more doesn't make it more difficult to get, and therefore it doesn't make it more rare. Some people think that the 1 in 8192 number is solely what makes a shiny rare. Now, it does contribute, it's part of the equation, but the time per encounter also contributes just as equally, if not more, to it being rare. As an example, if you were able to do an encounter per second instead and just quickly cycle through them, you would find the shiny much quicker and therefore invest less of a resource, and it would be less rare. If anyone can hop on the game and get a shiny in an hour, it's not nearly as rare as if they had to put in the same 30 hours you did. If shinies in all games were like this, people would just care less. There probably wouldn't really be a shiny hunting community because you wouldn't really spend a significant amount of time hunting. It wouldn't be much of a hobby. So while that 1 in 8192 is important, it's not the only variable that matters. If they had made the number 1 in 4096 initially, but each encounter took twice as long, they'd be the same rarity. On a side note, within each game, there are some ways to speed things up overall by cutting out overhead time, like limiting the encounters that you get, taking less time to get encounters when walking through grass, etc. And really anything in game that shortens the time between encounters is considered fair play for full odds generally. But just to really nail this point in with a more extreme example, let's say you fight a boss in a video game and someone tells you that there's a 1 in a million chance that he drops a certain weapon when you defeat him. Initially, most people would say that's incredibly rare. Wow, 1 in a million. However, you pull up the hood and it turns out that he drops multiple items each time, and each of those items has a 1 in a million chance of being that rare item. So each one has that low individual chance, but you get a lot of chances at once. So overall, your chances as a player are better. Oops, it turns out he actually drops 10,000 items on every kill. Now you can tell that if you kill the boss 100 times, you have a pretty decent chance at him dropping the rare item. Your perception that this is some godly rare item that nobody will ever get is changed to this being just a pretty rare item. The chances are still 1 in a million per item, that hasn't changed, just the frequency of opportunities to get it and the circumstances surrounding those chances has changed. Another way to look at it is if the boss's chances of dropping the item were 1 in 100, people wouldn't really think of it as that rare at first glance, but imagine you had to spend 10 hours fighting this boss every time to get that 1 in 100 chance. All of a sudden, you're looking at 1,000 hours of time commitment to get the item. It's way more rare not because of the odds, but rather the frequency of chances at those odds. Over time, people have found ways to get shinies faster without method hunting, and accordingly, the full odds community has created a loose set of rules that define what full odds is and isn't. This definition varies from person to person, but there are some generally agreed upon ways for you to make your hunt not full odds. If you ask some people within the full odds community, they'll say full odds simply means your chances of each individual Pokemon are 1 in 8192 and nothing else matters. But as you'll see later, the people who claim this have other rules for full odds no matter what, so it's never really the only thing that matters to them. This definition also excludes the 1 in 4096 chances that you'll find in newer games starting in Generation 6. This is effectively double the chances of previous games, but is still relatively rare. You'll still end up spending at least 15 hours for most shinies with this double chance. On a small side note, it's incredibly ignorant to think that all 1 in 8192 shinies are more rare than 1 in 4096 shinies. The time per encounter in combination with the odds is what matters. You can get a Safari Zone shiny in Generation 3 in 20 hours average at 8192, or you could spend 100 hours average getting a shiny starter in X and Y at 4096. To just think bigger number better is a little bit silly. Semantically, it doesn't really make sense to exclude 1 in 4096 from full odds, as 1 in 8192 are only the base chances for a shiny at the discretion of Game Freak. I'd also say a majority of people would say that 1 in 4096 is still full odds anyways, as long as they're the base chances in that game. You're also able to get shinies simply by manipulating your luck or RNG in most Pokemon games. This is often very difficult and skill-based, so I would say this falls more under the difficulty rarity. There is a pretty universal consensus that regardless of the fact that you got a shiny and the base odds of that game are 1 in 8192, if it wasn't random, you deliberately manipulated the chances and you knew that you were going to get it if you did it correctly, it ends up not being a full odds shiny. And I think this makes sense to both people who do RNG and to full odds hunters. Your chances are more like 1 in 1 to get it at that point because it wasn't random. It was guaranteed, assuming you did it correctly at least. This is still very impressive and a cool way to get shinies, but just isn't really the same type of hunting and doesn't really fit under the full odds label. Obviously, Pokemon games can be hacked too. You can edit your save file and add a million different shinies into it, or you can put code into your game to make all Pokemon shinies. These are obviously not considered full odds shinies, and I hope I don't have to explain why. Some people have modified their game consoles, or they play on emulators on their PC or their phone. Both allow you to speed up your game. This just makes the game's frames progress faster, allowing you to encounter Pokemon faster or more frequently, saving a significant amount of time. You can speed up your game times 20 and have a shiny within an hour, one that might take someone playing under normal conditions 30 hours. This is generally viewed as not full odds, as you're circumventing the thing that made the shiny rare in the first place, the time commitment. Some people claim it's not full odds because you're modifying your game, which just isn't true. The game is just progressing faster, but nothing about your chances or the game's code changes. This example is important as it does highlight the fact that the full odds community generally understands that time commitment is important. Personally, I would exclude speeding up your game from the full odds label, as at this point, full odds is a complex idea, an expression of rarity, not just a number. And by speeding up the game, you can drastically reduce the time commitment of any hunt, thereby reducing its rarity. There are also instances in some Pokemon games where you can encounter multiple Pokemon simultaneously, such as horde hunts where you see 5, or double encounters where you see 2, both of which circumvent a lot of the time commitment required for full odds shinies previously. Most of the community at one point considered this method hunting or not full odds, but I'd say it's more of a mixed bag now. Personally, I'd exclude this from the full odds label for reasons we'll discuss later. Interestingly, a lot of people used to think that Game Corner shinies weren't full odds. The Game Corner is a place in a few Pokemon games where you can just buy Pokemon. Most of the time you could buy 5 at a time and check if any were shiny very quickly and then restart your game. This generally takes about half as long as the next fastest shiny hunt in most games, so most people banned Game Corner from their shiny hunting competitions and claimed it wasn't full odds or was against the spirit of full odds because you get shinies too quickly. I personally think this is full odds though. In newer Pokemon games, instead of having to encounter Pokemon one by one, you can actually see multiple Pokemon at once, and that's just how almost every encounter in the game works. In Scarlet and Violet, this was even up to 15 Pokemon. This drastically speeds up shiny hunts, and many have claimed that this isn't full odds simply because you get shinies too fast, but I don't agree. It's full odds for Scarlet and Violet. Full odds for these games just isn't what people are used to from older games. Lastly, method hunting is the coverall label for ways of speeding up your hunt through in-game mechanics, typically ones that improve your chances. As an example, in Black 2 and White 2 in Generation 5, you could get a shiny charm which would improve your chances from 1 in 8192 to 3 in 8192, or 1 in 2731 rounded up, or adding what most would call 2 more rolls at the shiny every time you get an encounter. Method hunting can be adding 1 extra roll through a mechanic here or there, or it can be very extreme. In Scarlet and Violet, in some circumstances, you can improve your odds to about 1 in 500 or better, and with the incredibly fast encounters, you can churn out 6 or 7 shinies in an hour. Method hunting is universally agreed upon to be the thing that definitively makes a hunt not full odds, so there's not much disagreement here. So as you can see, there's a lot more to the term full odds than it appears on the surface. There's many unspoken rules and disagreements. Personally, the way I would define full odds is performing a shiny hunt in a Pokemon game without improving your chances and without artificially or inorganically reducing the average time commitment of the hunt. It encompasses all the rules that I explained earlier and makes the term much more sensible given all the context that we've discussed. And in my experience, this definition would mostly be agreed upon too. However, there's one exception. One way to get recognition from the full odds community, one way to bypass the time commitment of full odds shinies as much as you want, but still get credit from pretty much everyone.
stream deck, analyzer, moderator stance, sound filter, 6 monitors, pedals, drums, gaming guitar controllers, 6 consoles, 10 computers, bunch of wires, sound pads, speakers, antenna, satellites, dog cam, cat tree, cat this, 6 consoles, 6 consoles, 6 consoles, 6 consoles, 6 consoles, 6 consoles.
Multi-hunting is the act of running multiple consoles or instances of a game simultaneously with the express intention of shortening the time commitment of your shiny hunt by getting encounters faster. This likely started early on as a way for people who wanted to get shinies faster but didn't have method hunts available. Specifically, in Generation 3, there was absolutely no way to improve your individual chances of getting a shiny, so if you wanted to hunt a Pokemon but not put in the ridiculous time commitment, multi-hunting was your best bet. With the definition of full odds changing over time, multi-hunting slipped through the cracks as a method to definitively increase your chances of getting a shiny as a player, yet still keep the base odds of each individual game intact. Through influential content creators and misinformation, multi-hunting being categorized as full odds has become the status quo. I don't believe multi-hunting should be labeled as full odds. It contradicts the reason we use the term in the first place, which is an expression of rarity. When someone says they hunted a full odds shiny, you imagine them grinding away at this massive time commitment. But in 2026, someone can play on 32 consoles and get a shiny in a fraction of the time and still label it full odds without question. You might think, who cares, it's just semantics, it doesn't matter that much, but doing a full odds hunt is recognized as a great accomplishment by the community at large. Being able to put full odds on your video or stream title and to claim that you're doing full odds has a big impact on viewership and how people perceive you as a creator. Basically, everyone who multi-hunts has full odds in their tags on their stream, on Twitter, on their YouTube channel, and even on their Tinder profiles. So introduce themselves to other people as a full odds shiny hunter as a badge of honor. It even determines who wants to socialize with you. If you're doing method hunting, good luck getting almost anyone in the full odds community to care. Now, they don't have to care, but there's a lot of hypocrisy in this, as we'll see later. A YouTuber named Adef made a video not too long ago on this subject. Adef makes a variety of Pokemon related videos, but he doesn't seem to be a regular shiny hunter. With that said, a lot of his videos discuss the math involved in Pokemon games and sometimes shiny hunts, so he's a trusted voice in the Pokemon community. I do want to mention that I like Adef's content and I think he makes a lot of really interesting videos, but this video in particular was incredibly disappointing and to me disingenuous. It entirely ignored all of the conversation surrounding this issue and tunnel visioned on a single point. The only reasonable argument I've ever heard from anyone as to why multi-hunting is full odds is contained in this video. Watch for yourself if you want to verify, but to put it simply, the argument is that the odds of each game are independent and don't affect each other. And this is 100% true. If you have two independent events that happen simultaneously, the odds of those events don't influence each other. It's like if you flip 3 coins at the same time and 2 of them are heads, it doesn't make the last coin more likely to be a tails. But with that said, I've never heard anyone with a shred of credibility actually argue that the consoles are telepathically coordinating to improve each other's chances because you're playing an extra game. So this really is a straw man argument, but it needs to be addressed nonetheless. This argument completely ignores the idea of cumulative odds, or the player's odds. If you have 2 chances at a shiny at the same time, each game is 1 in 8192, but your chances as a player have been improved significantly. Sometimes it's argued that it's not 2 in 8192 at that point. If you had 8192 consoles, your chances wouldn't be 8192 out of 8192, and this is absolutely true as well, but why would we just look at the individual odds of each event rather than the player's odds? There's so many other scenarios where we just wouldn't do that. For example, if you went outside and there were 3 clouds, and each cloud had a 1 in 1,000 chance of striking you with lightning, then you were struck by lightning, it wasn't a 1 in 1,000 event. It was a lot closer to 1 in 333, although not exactly. Let's say the chances are actually 1 in a million per cloud. If there's a single cloud outside, you probably won't let that stop you from going outside. However, if there's 100,000 clouds, now you're second guessing going for a walk. Another way to look at it is with dice. Let's say your goal is to roll a 6. You throw your die, your chances of landing a 6 is 1 in 6. However, if you now throw 3 dice, your chances are not 1 in 6. Each individual die is 1 in 6, but overall, your chances of getting the result you're looking for is significantly increased. It's not quite 3 out of 6, which would be 50%. The easiest way to actually see the chances is to do a binomial distribution, or to just calculate the chances of the event not happening and then subtract that from 1. So 3 chances at 1 in 6 to get the right result would be 3 chances at 5 in 6 to not get the right result. So you do 1 minus 5 divided by 6 to the power of x. So we'll plug in 3 for x and we get 0.421296 rounded to 0.42, 42% chance. This isn't quite 50%, but at larger scales with shinies, 1 in 8192 3 times is 0.000366166. 3 in 8192 is 0.000366210. So the difference between 3 consoles and method hunting at 3 in 8192 is 0.0000005. With such an inconsequential difference, it's very strange that people playing on 3 consoles consider themselves to be getting more rare shinies than those getting a couple of extra rolls from a shiny charm. The average time commitment reduction for 3 consoles versus 3 total rolls with a shiny charm is practically identical, and the statistics and odds are practically identical as well. Most people playing multi-console can increase their chances far beyond that though, with the only practical limitation being getting enough consoles or having a computer that can run all those instances of the game. You can put yourself in a position where you reduce your expected time commitment by 95% and still claim that your shinies are more rare than someone who has to spend 10 times as long for the same shiny but is method hunting instead. Interestingly, within the multi-hunting community, most people have an arbitrary console limit where they say that it's no longer full odds. This entirely contradicts the premise that the only thing that matters is the individual odds of 1 in 8192, yet most will still say X amount of consoles isn't full odds anymore. Oftentimes, it's double the amount of consoles that person plays on. So someone playing 4 consoles might say 8 is no longer full odds, or someone playing 8 might say 16 or 32 or 25.767 is no longer full odds. There's never a rhyme or reason to this limit, it's just vibes. Some people don't want to step on toes, so they'll just say a number bigger than the max number that someone they know does. There's a larger content creator that does 32 consoles, and I've heard a lot of people say that's right at the limit. Now, I will say that there is a limit to this argument. Let's say you play on 3 consoles and you just slightly stagger the encounters. You're no longer getting the encounters at the same time. So this begs the question, how close would the encounters need to be for us to group them together? In my opinion, it's not truly about them being grouped together, but rather this goes back to circumventing the time commitment. Everything always comes back to the average time commitment. If we look back at my earlier definition, multi-hunting would not fall under the category of full odds as it increases the average speed of the hunt through means outside of the game. And yes, I would consider another game means outside of your game. While it doesn't improve your individual odds like method hunting, you're still circumventing that time commitment of a particular full odds hunt. Full odds is an expression of rarity, and inorganically reducing that rarity changes how the hunt should be labeled and perceived. If you haven't been around the shiny hunting community, you might be skeptical that this is how multi-hunters actually approach things. If you'd like a bit of evidence, here's the shiny hunting contest they were holding at the time that I wrote this video. As you can see, they've banned every form of method hunting. They've banned newer games that have fast encounters, and they've banned speed up. So it's clear that they understand that time commitment is an important metric. So why are 1 in 4096 shinies worth less points if they can take longer than a 1 in 8192 shiny? There's a 4 console limitation, which is great, but why can't someone use 4 times speed up? Why can't someone use a shiny charm? These are equivalent ways to get a shiny faster. There's no difference in practicality between someone running 4 instances of the game and someone using other methods to get encounters faster. So why are we gatekeeping these people? So we know that most multi-hunters consider a certain amount of consoles not full odds. We know that method hunting and multi-hunting are practically the same when it comes to the math. We know they're identical when it comes to how they affect time commitment. We know that full odds hunters will say many things aren't full odds if they reduce your time commitment. And with all this, it's really strange that there's been no significant conversation about this issue within the community. But let's say that the community just really doesn't want to budge. They want multi-hunting to be included in full odds, and they don't want the general public to understand rarity. They want the optics to stay the same. And they want to keep things divided between multi-hunting and method hunting, which are virtually the same thing at this point. Let's just say that 1 in 8192 is full odds if the individual Pokemon has those odds and nothing else matters. And the only thing that isn't full odds is increasing your chances from the base odds. So 3 chances at 1 in 8192 is full odds, but 3 in 8192 isn't full odds. Well, what if I told you I had been lying to you about something this entire time? Or at least not clarifying something with you? The entire premise of the argument that multi-hunters have made is assuming that method hunting in Pokemon games actually increases your odds. However, this is entirely incorrect. At least on all of the games I've been able to check, generations 5 through 7, and I've confirmed this with people who understand the game's code, method hunting does not actually give you one big individual chance at a shiny. It gives you multiple chances at full odds. For example, in Black and White 2, the shiny charm gives you 2 extra rolls. These rolls are not just added to the numerator in the fraction of odds like they claim. They are unique, individual chances to roll a shiny. 3 chances at 1 in 8192. The exact same math as getting 3 encounters on 3 consoles. To put it simply, the game's code rolls for a shiny at the base game odds, and if it's not shiny, it checks again. So for a game with a shiny charm, it would check 3 times total. The only difference between method hunting and multi-hunting is that you just can't see what's happening on the back end with method hunting, whereas with multi-hunting, you can see all of the failed results. The only tiny difference is that with multi-hunting, you could get multiple shinies at once, so multi-hunting is technically a better chance at a shiny statistically since you could get multiple, whereas with method hunting, it stops checking if you get a shiny, therefore giving you less chances on average as well. If multi-hunters want to maintain the argument that independent chances at the game's base odds make something full odds, then we have to say that speed up is full odds, we have to say that RNG manipulation is full odds, and we have to say that all of the method hunts that have for so long defined the term are now just full odds. Everything is full odds except for Gen 2 egg hunting. When everyone is super, no one will be. Look, it's kind of ridiculous that we even need to have this as a slam dunk in this argument, as even if the chances were stacked together like multi-hunters have claimed for so long, the math ends up being virtually identical as we discussed earlier. The fact that 0.000001 of a difference is enough to convince multi-hunters that they're getting shinies that are more rare is mind-blowing, but here we are. Next, I'd like to talk about why we're even in this position in the first place. Why hasn't there been a significant conversation about this? Why do I need to create this big yap session to explain everything? There's always been rumblings from individuals about this issue, but the multi-hunting community will very quickly dogpile you and shut you down when you try to discuss this. They'll tell you that you're gatekeeping, elitist, and wrong about the math, when in fact, they're all of those things. As a personal example, on Twitter, I replied to a large content creator who had tweeted something along the lines of, "It's fine if you want to method hunt, but it's not as cool as full odds. People who hunt full odds are cooler." This is not an exaggeration either. This was simply a statement of superiority by a multi-hunter, and practically everyone was in agreement, dunking on method hunters in the replies and celebrating how their shinies were so much cooler and more rare. So I explained some of what I talked about earlier. The math is virtually the same, the time commitment is virtually the same. Why are we even drawing a line between the two things? The content creator could have just replied to me or something, but instead they quote retweeted me to make sure that their audience had full exposure to my explanation, plus their response claiming that I'm bad at math. I proceeded to get hundreds of replies insulting me, telling me I didn't graduate school and I'm bad at math, and telling me that I'm a method hunter who's jealous, which is funny because I do full odds. I did my best to reply to everyone and defend myself, but there's only so much I could say. Now, to be fair, my example was Twitter, and I think people would be more civil in other places, but this sentiment can still be found in most people who multi-hunt. The vast majority of the full odds community is people who multi-hunt. I'd guess maybe 5% of people in the community do single console, so there really is no way to actually convince the community from within that this is a silly situation because they have raw numbers on their side. You'll be drowned out if you ever try to shift the narrative. Speaking of which, the reason method hunting has been described as improving your base odds isn't necessarily because that makes sense or because it's credible information, but rather it's just because it fits the single argument that multi-hunters have been making for so long to cling to the full odds label. I talked to some other Pokemon communities, specifically the RNG manipulation community, and they were surprised this was even a conversation. This is essentially common knowledge with everyone who knows anything about the way the game's code works. You see, early on in the Pokemon community, claiming you had gotten a full odd shiny was a way of getting attention, and more importantly, viewership if you were a streamer, YouTuber, etc. People from within the community would respect you more, and people who weren't as into Pokemon would hear full odds, 8192, big number equals rare, so they didn't know what else to think, and they'd contribute to viewership as well, and therefore give them money. This made streams more potentially exciting because more full odd shinies equals more entertainment and enabled them to make more videos about shiny hunting. By misleading people on how method hunting compares to multi-hunting, many larger content creators were able to push the idea that the individual odds of a Pokemon being shiny were the only factor relevant to it being rare, allowing them to retain the prestige associated with full odds, but at the same time allowing them to get shinies faster by playing multiple consoles, all while painting method hunting as a mathematically less honorable way of hunting. There's quite a few people who make a living, or at least a good chunk of change off of shiny hunting, and it's partially because of this narrative that's been kept. Because the multi-hunting community is so substantial, it's where the majority of the viewership is, and is perceived as a cool kids club because they're supposedly hunting more rare shinies, and calling it full odds solidifies that from people inside the community and people outside of the community who don't know any better. When method hunting started to become accessible in later Pokemon games, the multi-hunting community reacted by finding ways to shame people for method hunting, as in their eyes, it posed a threat to the value of their shinies, and for content creators, it posed a threat to their viewership and therefore income. I've seen method hunters called childish, impatient, TikTok or iPad kids who can't put in work for a shiny because their attention spans are non-existent, less intelligent, basement dwellers, and tourists, also known as somebody who isn't a real fan of Pokemon and is just playing temporarily. This was not from people outside of the community. This was directly from multi-hunters. It's really ironic because supposing that speeding up your hunt did make you any of those things, multi-hunters would be just as guilty. Now, I don't agree with any of those things, as we'll discuss later, but the idea of shaming someone within your own community for your own benefit is just disappointing, and the logic behind it is hypocritical. Going back to the video I mentioned from Adef, he quoted a specific content creator multiple times, one that's been around since basically the beginning of shiny hunting, and they've continually spread these ideas that we've discussed, and they've continually benefited from this narrative. I don't know the details or the thought process behind the video, but to me it seems like this video was created as a way to try to shut down the tiny bit of conversation that's been taking place within the community regarding full odds. What's a better way to end the conversation than to have a math authority say that the math is on the multi-hunter side? These larger content creators set the tone for the rest of the community, and with the tone being that multi-hunting is full odds and full odds is better than method hunting, they protect their audience and their viewership and make sure that they can continue getting the credit that they want, all while taking the same shortcuts that they shame others for. Another factor that's incredibly sad is that much of the multi-hunting community is against emulators. They think that in order for your shiny to be legit, it has to be acquired on an original console and original cartridge. Now, mind you, many of their own consoles are modified to allow for recording and controller mods, which controller mods allow you to control all of your consoles simultaneously with a single controller, but they think that if you play the exact same software and have the same exact experience, your shinies are somehow illegitimate or lesser. And mind you, some of these people actually play on original hardware consoles, but mod them to play ROMs, so not an original cartridge. I won't get too into the details, but it's important to know this because becoming one of the multi-hunting cool kids requires you to invest hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Recording your shinies is important for streaming or even just uploading YouTube videos, so modifying your console to allow for that is a must for many, with some exceptions. Much of the time, people will be skeptical of your shinies without footage, even if they won't say it out loud, so hunting without recording feels pointless for many. Then, the controller mods are also a major convenience and a big expense. And most of all, old Nintendo consoles and Pokemon games can be pretty expensive, and if you want to run 4, 8, 16 consoles, you're going to be spending quite the pretty penny. Multi-hunters have unintentionally, or maybe in some cases intentionally, created a financial gatekeeping system that prevents people who are less well off from feeling included in the community. Sure, you can single hunt with your childhood console, but why aren't you getting your full odd shinies as fast as the guy with 8 consoles? And don't you dare get a shiny charm on your game, as that would mean you're not doing full odds, and not doing full odds equals bad. This need for so many consoles and so many Pokemon games has further inflated an already overinflated market, making it exponentially more expensive to fit in with this community. Let's talk about me for a moment. I am a single console player, and I probably always will be, and you might think I have a bias in this, and I certainly do. Part of why I started to think about this issue was a bit selfish. People are playing on multiple consoles and getting shinies exponentially faster than me and still getting credit for full odds. Of course I had some thoughts about it. However, I got over that pretty quickly. My real issue with the community started when Scarlet and Violet came out. Method hunting was so accessible in those games, and so many people were buying and playing them, the discourse surrounding full odds and method hunting was louder than ever, and the elitism and gatekeeping from the multi-hunting community was more present than ever. I played Scarlet and Violet and method hunted myself. It's just what I thought was the most fun in that context for me. I streamed it on Twitch, and when I would raid multi-hunters, they would passively or directly shame me for method hunting. I had someone playing 16 consoles complain that the only reason that I was getting shinies quickly is because I was method hunting and I couldn't wait for shinies like them. This isn't the most common narrative you'll hear publicly. Most people care about optics and they don't want to be perceived as this person who's putting other people in the community down. Most people in the shiny hunting community as a whole want to portray it as this open and welcoming place, and it actually is in almost all other aspects. However, in private discords, in direct messages, many of these people who claim to be welcoming will say some pretty awful things about people who don't like to hunt the way they do. In addition, there's so many seemingly harmless opinions that people have that end up having sweeping consequences. By having these bad takes, you enable the people that are actually toxic to the community by affirming their elitist views. Even if you're not one of those people who's directly contributing to the bad behavior of many members of the community, you're indirectly making the community a worse place if you reinforce opinions such as shinies on emulator not being legit or less exciting, multi-hunting being full odds, and full odds hunting making you cooler. When it comes down to it, I personally don't care about getting more credit for doing full odds. The idea that full odds is superior to other ways of hunting is pretty ridiculous to me. We're all looking for alternate colored pixel monsters in a children's video game, so let's not take ourselves too seriously. It all really comes down to preference. If someone prefers to hunt in a way that they get a shiny every 15 hours, or if they really need to get one every 5 hours, they should hunt in a way that ensures that they want to keep hunting. For me, doing incredibly long hunts is the most exciting. Now, I have a limit, but generally the longer the hunt, the more excited I'll be when I get the shiny. The shorter the average time of the hunt, the less gratification I get from getting it, and even getting multiple shinies that add up to that same longer amount of time wouldn't be greater than the sum of its parts, at least to me. But some people think about things differently and just want to make sure they can stay engaged with the hunt before they lose motivation. Many of these people opt to method hunt as their solution, and the rest opt to multi-hunt. It's no wonder multi-hunters don't want to do single console though. Spending so much time on a single rare Pokemon seems pretty ridiculous in today's day and age. I will say, I do think there is a point of diminishing returns where if you're getting a shiny every 10 minutes, it's kind of hard to see the excitement in it. This is possible in Scarlet and Violet, and it's exactly how I hunted, and I got sick of it pretty fast. Some might enjoy this, but I think anyone that wants to hunt that way will find it's not a sustainable long-term hobby. With that said, a majority of multi-hunting and method hunting is cutting hunts down to maybe a few hours at the least, so most people are still getting pretty rare shinies. Personally, the only thing I really care about is how much time in general you commit to shiny hunting. I don't look down on someone because they can only do it for a few hours a week, but I do respect putting a lot of time into it in general. As an example, if someone wanted to cut a 60-hour hunt down to a 20-hour hunt with a multi-hunt or a shiny charm, and then hunted 2 more Pokemon at that same time commitment, they're still committing 60 hours to shiny hunting. Yes, each individual shiny is less rare, but I generally see them as adding up to being as rare as a 60-hour shiny that I got. While I might prefer the excitement of getting just the one 60-hour shiny, it's just that, my preference. You're still showing the same amount of dedication to shiny hunting, you're just getting rewarded in shorter bursts. Think about it in the context of speedrunning. Now, I'm not saying that shiny hunting is exactly like speedrunning, but I think there's a lot of commonalities in the communities. Looking at Super Mario 64, there are 4 main categories: 0 and 1 star, which I kind of grouped together, 16 star, 70 star, and 120 star. Just because 120 star takes longer than 70 star doesn't make the runners superior to the others. They're just different categories that value different things. 120 star values consistency, less risks than other categories, and endurance. 16 star values risk a lot more and aims for more of a sprint type of endurance. And with shiny hunting, full odds is just a label for the type of hunt that you're doing, and using the term helps people understand the time commitment that was involved in the hunt. Telling someone that something isn't full odds shouldn't be an insult, but it is in 2026 for some reason. You'll hear many people in the community publicly mirror the sentiment of hunt how you prefer, especially in the multi-hunting community, but their behavior often doesn't reflect this. Going back to the shiny contest, why can't people use shiny charm to speed up their hunt ×3 if someone can use 4 consoles? Why do the points completely ignore time commitment and reward going for shorter hunts? Why is every other way of getting shinies faster banned except spending money on a bunch of consoles? On a side note, the way that you should do shiny hunting contests is by setting clear rules tying into time commitment. It's very easy to calculate the average time commitment of a hunt. Just figure out how long each encounter takes, multiply that by the odds, and then figure out how many hours that is on average. It's very simple. Then you can have a point system based on the rarity of shinies that people go for, that rarity being the average time commitment. Otherwise, people will always be incentivized to go for faster shinies. Why go for a long soft reset when you could just go for a game corner shiny or a quick random encounter hunt? This also means people can hunt however they have access to and still be included. You can make it full odds only, but then you'd have to make it single console. If you allow multiple consoles, you have to allow the equivalent advantage in method hunting or speed up, or you're being hypocritical and needlessly exclusive. In any case, the method hunting community and multi-hunting community have the same goals. They want to get shinies more quickly than full odds will allow. The difference is that multi-hunters want to be perceived as hunting full odds, and many of them want to be perceived as being better than method hunters as a consequence, even if they're not willing to say it out loud. Let's go back to defining full odds. Why do I care so much that we more accurately define and use the term? Well, if you take away the label for multi-hunters, you take away the tool they've used for so long to claim superiority to method hunters. It's not about me being better than someone because I'm playing one console, which I'm not better. It's about showing multi-hunters they're not better than method hunters. I hope that this can bridge the gap between them. Almost nobody actually does full odds nowadays, and that's understandable, but why do these two basically identical communities have to be entirely divided? Why does one side of the community have to claim that they're better and cooler than the other side? In the words of Rick Grimes from The Walking Dead, we can all live together. Many other communities already put down shiny hunting, even many Pokemon speedrunners. I've heard one of the most popular Pokemon speedrunners say it's a complete waste of time and is stupid, so why do we have to crap on each other when we're already getting crapped on? You can have a preference of liking multi-hunting over method hunting, but it's ridiculous to not recognize that they're virtually identical means to an identical goal. I did want to again leave a small disclaimer that I've said a lot of very generalized things in this video about the multi-hunting community. I don't mean to say that every multi-hunter has bad takes or is negative towards method hunters. I know a lot of people in the community that are very positive, welcoming, and never gatekeep or act elitist, but with that said, as I stated previously, by having the bad takes that we discussed earlier, you are enabling those people who are negative. So what can we do from here? Well, as a multi-hunter, using the term full odds correctly and sensibly will ensure that the general public has a better understanding of how rarity works when it comes to shiny hunting and in general. It'd also solidify that it can't be used as a tool to put others down. Also, by understanding the commonalities of multi and method hunting, you should be more welcoming to people who choose to speed up their hunts other ways or can't afford 6 consoles. If you're a single game player and you think you're superior to method hunters or multi-hunters, I'm not on board. You should encourage shiny hunting in general and understand people's perspectives. If you're a method hunter, and I mean multi-hunting is method hunting, but if you're a traditional method hunter, keep doing your thing and carry on knowing that most other people also just want a method hunt. If you're an RNG manipper, you should stop because it's cheating, oh my god! No, just kidding. And if you're from outside of the community, I'd recommend engaging with this discourse anywhere you can. I highly doubt most of the multi-hunting community will really want to look at things differently or change their approach, so having external pressure is really the only way to get things to change. If 95% of people involved in the conversation have a conflict of interest, you can guess where the conversation is going to go. Lastly, you can help more people see this video by liking it, commenting, and sharing it. I'll also be uploading more videos about shiny hunting in the future, so if you had a good time, you could subscribe. I do want to do a final Q&A, as I know there will still be some responses from people who want to muddy the water, so let me get all these conversations out of the way. I'm a multi-hunter, and I don't think I'm better than method hunters, and I encourage them. I do appreciate that, but a majority of multi-hunters won't really engage with method hunters at all. They don't raid them on Twitch, they don't watch their videos, they don't try to be a part of their communities, and they don't get excited for their shinies. This has been the overwhelming experience that I've had in my time in the community. In addition, many of the multi-hunters will seem to have a good attitude on the surface, but how they really feel may differ, and how they behave behind closed doors and their choices as a consequence end up having a lasting impact on the community. You might have zero bias, and if you do, good for you, but you're in the small minority. Since you're a single hunter, don't you benefit from this? Yes, I do benefit from it. I am a full odds streamer, albeit very small, and I'm not interested in trying to grow my audience. It is a hobby. I don't run ads, I don't ask for subs, and I don't make much of an attempt to grow other than posting the shinies I get on TikTok and Shorts. That could change in the future, but regardless, it doesn't change the logic of what I've talked about, and I'm not making this video for my own benefit. Why is encountering multiple Pokemon at once in hordes different than in Scarlet and Violet? So this is a really good question, and honestly, it's a bit of a gray area. The term full odds isn't perfect, but rather it's just supposed to give someone a general idea of the time commitment on a particular hunt. You can have a full odds hunt that's 15 hours on average and one that's 300 hours on average. The goal of the term is to just point someone in the right direction. In games with horde encounters, there's no way to get that many encounters outside of hordes, and the standard encounter you'll see is just a single Pokemon. Hordes are an exception. Seeing 15 Pokemon at once is just the standard in Scarlet and Violet. So when you imagine a full out shiny in Scarlet and Violet, you immediately know it was very likely a quick hunt, maybe a couple of hours. When you imagine it in, say, X and Y, you're expecting more like 15 hours. Horde hunts are maybe a 3 or 4 hour endeavor, last I checked. So you're subverting the typical expectation of how fast you should get shinies in that game, and I think that makes it ambiguously not full odds. The encounters being simultaneous on top of that just puts it over the line for me personally, but I'd understand if this is more of a point of contention. Why do you hate multi-hunting? So I don't hate multi-hunting at all. It's actually my preferred way of watching shiny hunting. I think it's really cool. I think the commitment that people make to getting so many consoles and getting a crazy setup and modding them all with controllers and everything is super interesting. The stats behind it is really interesting. And there's quite a few people who I like to watch, including Sabian and Sammy Snow TV, which, by the way, they don't condone this video. I'm just mentioning their names because I like to watch them. I don't have a lot of free time to watch streams, so if I am watching one, I generally want there to be a higher likelihood that I see a shiny. So while I don't prefer to hunt this way, it doesn't mean that I look down on it. I just don't agree that it's full odds, and I don't agree with the opinions and behaviors of many members of the community. What if I'm multi-hunting, but I'm playing different games? So if you're doing something to drastically reduce the average time commitment of a hunt or across multiple hunts, I think that's trending away from full odds. You could be doing 4 different hunts at the same time, but the law of averages says that you, the player, will get shinies 4 times faster on average in that scenario. And your experience as the player is what's important, as we discussed earlier, not the individual odds. There can definitely be gray areas in this conversation. Like, let's say someone has one hunt going and then they have a tiny bit of downtime between encounters and they're working on another hunt, and they end up saving maybe 10% of the average time commitment on both hunts by working on them at the same time. This is basically still full odds. I don't want to be petty about it, and I'm not here to pass judgment on every quirky situation, but I think it's pretty clear when something is contradicting the idea of full odds, and it's when something drastically or inorganically reduces your average time commitment for a shiny in a particular game. Some people will try to use niche situations like this to make things feel ambiguous and muddy the waters, but I think it's very clear. Why don't we just create a new term for single console full odds? So this doesn't make sense at all. The term was originally coined without people even thinking about the fact that you can improve your chances with multiple consoles, and people probably even weren't thinking about the statistics of it at that time. It's also not a good idea to keep multi-hunting under this label because all the method hunting options I've checked are the same thing anyways, multiple independent chances. So they'd need to be under full odds as well, and there'd be no point. The line we draw for full odds is at reducing the average time commitment of a shiny hunt inorganically, or when multiple simultaneous chances isn't the norm for a game, kind of as an exception. The optics of having a new extra phrase for something that existed prior to multi-hunting becoming popularized doesn't really make sense. Multi-hunters don't need to use the term, and with it being an expression of rarity, it loses all of its meaning if you can cut down your average time commitment infinitely with more and more consoles. Multi-hunters can call their hunts just that. Hey, I got a shiny Nidorina at multi times 4 odds. I don't care. I just think it doesn't fit into the idea of full odds based on every metric we've discussed. Personally, I'd just call it method hunting since it's identical mathematically and practically to most method hunts. You can't just change the definition of a word or a phrase, even if what you're saying makes sense. So that's incorrect. Language is malleable, it changes all the time. Don't get me started on the hot dog is a sandwich conversation, but we have a bunch of new slang words added to the dictionary every year. The term full odds will never be in the dictionary though, because it's just a niche idea from a niche community. But with that said, I'm not even proposing a new definition. I'm just suggesting that we be consistent and use the term in a way that makes sense with the rules that have been created around it. The definition isn't even standardized between two people who hunt the exact same way. It's important that we're precise and effective with our language, as so many of our problems are caused by poor communication, including people having the wrong idea on what a word or phrase means. On a side note, the term full odds doesn't even make sense because 1 in 8192 is a rate. Odds are expressed with a colon, 1 to 8191. So we've been using the wrong verbiage the whole time anyways. Have you ever been as far as decided as to go want Doobie look more like even so much as before? Yes. Why does how you categorize your hunt even matter? So it matters because both from within the community and out, the way that people perceive shiny hunts affects how they engage with them, what communities they choose to be a part of, what streams and YouTube videos they watch, and so many other things. The fact that you can tell someone that you got a full out shiny and they don't understand that you getting it with 32 consoles means it's less rare is pretty mind blowing to me. I want people to understand rarity and statistics more than they do now, even outside of the context of Pokemon. Aren't you gatekeeping multi-hunters by excluding them from full odds? No. As mentioned in the speedrunning example, we're just using a label to help others understand more about a hunt. If someone submits a 0-star run to the 16-star category in Mario 64 speedrunning, you're not gatekeeping them by rejecting the run. You're saying they submitted to the wrong category. It's not that doing full odds makes you better, it's just that the individual shiny was a longer average time commitment. That's it. The superiority of rarity and the pedestal that full odds has been put on is something that was largely spearheaded by the multi-hunting community, and I don't condone it. The rarity of a shiny is how much the individual who got it cares about it. So I would agree with this sentiment, but I think we're getting some ideas and some words mixed up. I'd consider that more personal value rather than rarity. Yes, your first shiny on your first console with your first game ever might mean more to you, but that doesn't make it more rare in general. It just increases its value to you. It may qualify for some other types of rarity, but not necessarily by resource investment. You can perceive something to be as rare as you want, but it doesn't mean others will agree. Full odds as a phrase is just a tool to help someone understand general time commitment, and it doesn't even tell the full story, which I'll get into in another video. There's so much I still want to say, but I've already yapped up a storm. If you have any other questions or concerns, post them in the comments and I'll see about responding. I do appreciate you watching and listening, and I wish you the best of luck. Thanks.